Good afternoon and welcome to Data Capture and Tracking for Student Veterans Considerations from Student Veterans of America. My name is Sarah Appel and I am the project coordinator for the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit, which is an initiative of the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. We want to thank our sponsors, Lumina Foundation and USA Funds. Without them, our work would not be possible. So a short overview. The mission of the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit is to facilitate an interstate partnership of 13 states and to translate competencies acquired by veterans through military training and experiences toward college credentials. States will exchange information and share best practices in the areas of articulation of credit, certification and licensure, communication, and data and technology. Project goals: to assist student veterans with completing post-secondary education and the transition into civilian employment. MCMC has established the following 3 goals: assist with critical life transitions from the military to post-secondary education and then from post-secondary education to civilian employment. Increase post-secondary education completion rates by creating models for the consistent, transparent, and effective awarding of credit for military training and experience that can be scaled regionally and nationally, thereby lowering the cost of education and reducing the time to completion. And number 3, establish a strong network of support, communication, documentation, and data collection among institutions and organizations for the purpose of promoting shared interests and tracking the efficacy of efforts to enhance service members' educational success. To do all this work, we have 4 work groups. We have the articulation of academic credit, licensure and certification, communication and outreach, and data technology and systems. And today our moderators from the Data Technology and Systems work group are our co-chairs, Terry Lambert and Kevin Sosa.
Thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Kevin Sosa. As Sarah mentioned, I am the Associate Director of Technology with Articulation and Transfer Network here in Ohio, part of the Ohio Department of Higher Education. And today we have, we feel, a very, very good presentation from 2 of our colleagues over at the Student Veterans of America. But first, I want to mention that a little bit about our work group. So our Data Technology and Systems work group, we're basically tasked with coming up with some of the tools of the trade, technology that can be used, and we want to look at the promising practices and things that we could do to help boost data collection that can help retention and graduation for service members. And so as we look at different technologies that are out there, different analysis, we're also looking at agencies and institutions that collect data and kind of find out if it's held at the state level, just to kind of see how some of our initiatives are working statewide, share some of those best practices. And so we've looked at surveys in the past, and we've done different things with our work group to try to help. And we're hoping that today's webinar will help boost and help bolster some of that hard work. Terry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. This is Terry Lambert, and I'm the Director of Transfer Indiana here at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. Fortunate enough to be Kevin Sosa's co-chair working with the Data Technology and Systems. So we welcome you today and look forward to the presentation.
Thank you so much, Terry. I also just want to point out for everyone that you can post questions using the chat box, and we'll take questions at certain points, and hopefully not to interrupt the presentation, but definitely post your questions so that we can have them answered in a timely fashion. So, without any further ado, I would like to introduce James Schmeling, who is the Executive Vice President of Strategic Engagement with the Student Veterans of America, and Dr. Chris Cate, who is the Vice President of Research with the Student Veterans of America. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hope you're having a good morning so far and a good afternoon later today. What James and I are going to present to you today is the first report out of a series of 3 that focuses on the National Veteran Education Success Tracker Project, or as we like to call it, the NVEST project. The first report really focuses on two specific questions, which I'll get to a little bit later, and how we're going to divide this presentation is that I'll talk about the first question, and then James is going to talk more about the second one. We want to acknowledge all of our partners in this, without whom we wouldn't be able to do this. The National Student Clearinghouse and the VA, it was their data, and through a data match that we, SVA, helped to arrange, that allowed us to collect this data and analyze this data to provide the results to everyone, as well as the Kresge Foundation, Google, and Lumina, who helped fund the analysis and the project as well. So the big question, the overall question that NVEST and all of its reports are looking at is, what is the post-9/11 GI Bill return on investment to the country? And why are we looking at the post-9/11 GI Bill? It's a big investment by the taxpayers, of approximately $10 to $13 billion a year. And so the NVEST project was developed to provide an accurate measure of student veterans' post-secondary academic outcomes and begin looking at the post-9/11 GI Bill's return on investment. This is important, and this is new because in the past, out of the 70-year history of the GI Bill, we haven't been able to have really accurate and nationwide real-time tracking of student veterans' outcomes. We've usually had to wait for the results, the impact to show up in federal databases like the census before we can really gauge the impact of any version of the GI Bill. So this was a little bit new, a little bit different. I like to call it a more big data perspective of working with data in the GI Bill to get more of a real-time sense of what student veterans are accomplishing using the post-9/11 GI Bill. I talked a little bit about big data, just a little bit about the data source itself. The VA helped us identify student veterans. These were veterans that used the post-9/11 GI Bill, so we knew they served, we knew that they were going to school. That helped identify one of the big barriers to doing this type of research, which is identifying student veterans. They're protected identification, like people with students with disabilities. So it's very difficult, as probably everybody on the call knows. Unless they self-identify, they're not. It's really difficult to be track them. So going to the VA, allowing the VA to match their GI Bill data with a data warehouse that has enrollment information. That was the National Student Clearinghouse's involvement. The clearinghouse has enrollment data for about 96–97% of all post-secondary students in the U.S. and in a couple of countries. When we matched it, we had 96.4% of post-9/11 GI Bill records. And that was amazing. It means that we have a good match, a good, strong data system to look at for student veterans and their academic achievements. A couple of things to note. There were two groups that weren't included in this match. The first one are veterans who have never used the post-9/11 GI Bill. That doesn't mean that if they use it later on, they won't show up in future data matches, but for right now, if they haven't used the post-9/11 GI Bill, they're not going to show up. The other one is connected to that is transfer of eligibility. Post-9/11 GI Bill, veterans have the option of transferring the eligibility to their dependent spouse, child. We excluded them from this data match for a couple reasons. The most notably is a methodological question. We don't know what the percentage of that transfer will do to the overall outcomes. So we decided to not have to worry about that by excluding them. Doesn't mean that we're not going to go back to them. We just want to understand that transfer a little bit better before we examine that. And then the only other group that was excluded was students that were enrolled at schools outside of the Clearinghouse's network, which was a very small number. One of the things that I want to mention is the time frame. So there's two separate independent time frames that can get a little bit confusing. There's a student veteran sample time frame. So the student veteran sample from the VA covered veterans that initially used the post-9/11 GI Bill between August of 2009 and December of 2013. August 2009 was the beginning of the post-9/11 GI Bill, and December 2013 was the natural breakpoint that we had when we were doing the data match that allowed us to have at least 1 or 2 semesters that we would be able to get data from. What this means is that this sample, this NVEST sample that we're going to talk about, is basically the first 853,111 student veterans that have used the post-9/11 GI Bill. Now, with the matching part, the enrollment data, that is dependent upon the National Student Clearinghouse, but it's not dependent upon when the student veteran has used the post-9/11 GI Bill. So that's a little bit different than what you may see with the VA comparison toolkit, where it's restricted to the times when student veterans are using the post-9/11 GI Bill. But National Clearinghouse does not have that limitation. We have enrollment data going all the way up to September 2015 and as far back as, on average, about 2002 to 2003. It's depending on the specific school and when they join the clearinghouse and how they handle their data system. Some of them have it farther back, some of them not as much. But the overall idea is that we have a strong enrollment data for a large or all of the sample in the NVEST cohort.
Chris, this
yeah.
is Kevin. I think someone we had a quick clarification. Someone just wanted to know what was the last group that was not included. I think
the last group that was not included. So there's three groups. I'll say 3 groups. One were student veterans that have not used the post-9/11 GI Bill yet. The second one were transfer of eligibilities, so transferring the post-9/11 GI Bill to a spouse or child. And the third was student veterans that attended a college or program out using the post-9/11 GI Bill outside the clearinghouse's network. And these were a little bit more of the trade school and on-the-job training student vets.
Great, thank you. You can go ahead.
Yep. All right. So now we're getting into the two main questions for this first report. And again, we're focusing on the return on investment, specifically looking at academic outcomes, because this provides the foundation and helps us give an idea of what the potential economic outcome is. Many people will remember the $7 to $1 ratio from the original GI Bill, that $7 will return to the economy for every $1 that was put into the GI Bill. We're still a few decades away from that type of analysis, but this at least gives us an idea, a good, strong foundation to begin looking at that type of return on investment. So to start off with, this report and presentation is going to cover 2 main questions. First, which is what are the post-secondary academic outcomes of student veterans who use the post-9/11 GI Bill between August 9th, I think that's supposed to be August 1st, 2009, through December 31st, 2013. The second one is, in the first 6 years, what has the post-9/11 GI Bill produced in terms of degrees and graduates? I'm going to answer the first one, and then I'll turn it over to James for the second question. So answer the first question is student veterans are doing very well. far better than their non-traditional peers and better than the traditional student population. They have a 54% completion rate and an 18% persistence rate, which put together would be a 72% success rate, which is what the clearinghouse also reports. So what this means is that 72% of student veterans who have used the post-9/11 GI Bill either already have or are continuing to persist in pursuing their first degree. Now, these are degrees anywhere from certificate to PhD. We counted all of them. To give you a little bit of how it breaks down, only about 5% were certificates, about 60% were for initial degree, 60% were bachelor's or above, and then the remaining 25 to 35% were associate's degrees. So this helps address some of the myths and wrong notions of student veterans, that they are succeeding in college and that they are pursuing high demand degrees. And with that, I will turn it over to James for the next question.
Hi, this is James. Nice to meet everybody virtually, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about higher education. One of the things that I think is relevant here and that we haven't really discussed to this point is that there are an awful lot of students who are coming in who are obtaining credit for their prior education and training, and some of that is related to their prior credit in institutions of higher education. And it's important to understand that we were able to look at that education and training in a traditional higher education institution, looking at it with the National Student Clearinghouse data, but not with VA data. For the data on what credits they had earned from military service, there was no comparison data, so we can't actually look at those kinds of things. There are some other interesting components as well related to what work they're doing, what they're studying, and so on, and how that relates to what they did in the military. But broadly, the vast majority of folks do something completely different in their civilian lives than what they did while they were in the military, particularly those who pursue higher education. Some variation between officers and enlisted, and senior officers in particular tend to do some things that were similar to what they did in the military service, having to do with particular expertise, and civilian defense contractors and others like that. But broadly, there's generally a change in what people are pursuing between their military service and their higher education degrees. I think it's also important to understand and put into context a little bit about the number of students and the number of student veterans broadly, and how many military veterans there are and they're leaving service. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those things in just a moment as well. One of the principal conversation questions that I get from folks is, if student veterans are doing so well and if there are so many of them, why don't I know anything about it? And the answer to that is in this slide. The reason that you don't know anything about student veterans who are pursuing their degrees and graduating is broadly that under the post-9/11 GI Bill, they actually didn't start in substantial numbers until it hit about 2012. In the post-9/11 GI Bill, it was passed in 2008, and the first folks were eligible to begin enrollment in 2009, and you're starting to see those graduation figures in 2010. And so in this chart, you see the growth. 20,000 graduated who had used post-9/11 GI Bill in 2010. In 2011, it was nearly 55,000. In 2012, 80,000. And then in 2013 and beyond, it's actually been 100,000 or more. The 2015 data point there is because of the time period and the cutoff of the time period, but the overall for the year was over 100,000. And similarly, 2016 and we predict 2017 as well will have over 100,000 who are graduating. The reason that this is really significant is because what we know about military members who are transitioning is that about 30% of them already have degrees. So there are about 200 to 220,000, give or take, who are transitioning every year right now. Because of the drawdown, it's a relatively low number, the drawdown being the reduction in size of the military. But we're actually growing again a little bit right now, and so these figures will most likely go up and increase. In any case, for purposes of our discussion today, about 200,000 will separate every year. About 30% or 60,000 of them already have a college degree. 20% of those are officers, and 10% of those are enlisted who already have a college degree. And then there are another roughly 20% who are not going to pursue a degree and don't have a degree, and those are the folks who go back home, they enter service sector roles, they do other kinds of business startups and farming and other sorts of occupations that don't require a degree immediately and may never pursue that degree. The great part for us is that we know about 100,000 a year, or almost 50% of those transitioning service members actually will enter higher education and will use their post 9/11 GI Bill benefits or other GI Bill benefits. So we actually get about 100,000 a year who are entering higher education. And as you saw from these numbers, roughly 100,000 a year who are graduating. In addition to that, there are about 1.1 million who are currently in higher education and using GI Bill benefits. And of those, about half work full-time and study full-time, and about 0.25% work part-time. And in addition to that, there is also a large group of folks who are using transferred GI Bill benefits. It's actually about 167,000 right now at this particular moment. So just to our organizers, I just want to be sure on one thing. I have a network connection error that's up on my screen right now that's saying exit the program. I'm not clicking that button, but I may need somebody else to advance the slides because it looks like I may have just lost my network connection. So we're going to go ahead and go to slide 19 now if we can. And if somebody
I went ahead and advanced it.
Pardon?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're on slide 19 now, and what we're looking at in slide 19 is broadly the numbers of folks who are in a couple of different degree areas. And apologies again for the stumbling here for a second. I actually am having a hard time reading 19, but broadly there are about 27% of all student veterans who are pursuing business degrees and about 14% of all student veterans who are pursuing their degrees and earning their degrees in STEM disciplines, and then about 10% who are earning their degrees in health-related and health professions. So it's a pretty good opportunity here for folks to pursue degrees that are in high demand. What we also know from our data, in addition to this, is their performance is very high. So we know that the average GPA for a student veteran is about a 3.35, and the average GPA across civilians who have never served is about a 3.11. So it's about a quarter point higher there. The graduation rates, as Chris discussed earlier, are very high. There are some interesting differences between those who are in the public sector and those who are in the private not-for-profit compared with those who are in the for-profit education sector in terms of graduation rates, with the folks who are in public universities graduating at about 60% and the folks who are in a private not-for-profit graduating at about 66%. And then, of course, you still have the persisting to degree roles, which are beyond that. One of the things that's not in this data that we're sharing with you right now, but that we know from the NVEST research data, is the career pathing that exists related from community college to four-year institution and the transfer credits happening at that level. So a lot of folks are going into a college or university where they're able to get some of their transfer credits, and then through articulation agreements going into a four-year degree opportunity. So there are some good opportunities there for transition and transfer. And there's probably some usefulness in understanding who's doing those articulation agreements very, very well and helping students get into their original school and then articulating their degree programs with the four-year degree institutions and so on. Broadly, we know that these are in-demand areas. Our business and industry partners have told us that, and they're comparable roughly to some other student choices related particularly to business and higher education. If we go to the next slide, slide 20.
Sure thing, Chris. I want to advance the slide. I'll advance the slide 20 for you. I do have a question as I've advanced it. I have a question coming up that basically says, that's asking if you could repeat the percentages of how many already have degrees and how many don't intend to pursue a degree. I think that was from a slide ago.
Sure. So right now, I'll give you the numbers and the percentages both. So right now, there are approximately 200,000 people a year exiting military service. Of those, about 30% actually have a degree already. And those 30% who have a degree, 20% are officers and 10% are enlisted. Then what we look at is the 100,000 a year that are entering. So that's roughly 50%, and those 50% are going to earn a degree. The vast majority of those are actually earning bachelor's degrees. But looking at the overall degree attainment, we see that the highest number are bachelor's degrees. The second highest number are community college or associate's degrees. The third highest is related to the master's level, master's in business administration, MPA, master's in science, and so on. And then there are also a large number who are pursuing their PhDs and doctoral degrees. Of those, so given that 100,000 or 50% who are pursuing education and the 30% who already have degrees, that leaves a roughly 20% or 40,000 a year who are roughly 20% or 40,000 a year who are not going to pursue a degree and do not already have a degree on average. So there's some variation for that. And again, when we look at that and we look at the vast number of folks who are leaving military service, what we know is about 80% of military veterans do one of two things. They either go home to their home of record where the last place is that they lived or that their spouse is from before entry into military service, or alternatively they stay at their last duty station. And for those where San Diego was the last duty station, boy, wouldn't I love to be them. But for a lot of other folks, they're staying in wherever their last duty station is. And interestingly, they're going into civilian sector roles that are related to what they did while they were in the military in those cases. So folks who are naval mechanics and welders and all of those sorts of things may have stayed in those shipyard areas in Virginia, for instance, if they were in the Navy, and done similar kinds of roles. So those folks are likely not. They're going to go back into service sector roles and retail and things like that. So the breakdowns are 50% are going to pursue, 30% already have, and about 20% are probably not going to pursue higher education after they get out.
Thank you so much for
Any
that.
other questions?
We actually do have one other question. We have a question that basically says, is the GPA aggregate of all benefit recipients, or is it just for the veterans?
We were just looking at veterans in that case. There were surveys and surveys of veterans, not of dependents, no transferred GI Bill recipients. So about a 3.35 compared to a 3.11.
All right, thank you for that. I have one other that just came in. So in the fact sheet, so the question goes, in the fact sheet, or the statement I should say goes, in the fact sheet report, the first block on demographics pertaining to women veterans is a little deceiving. I think this is referring to like the summary. It had this person said, I had a couple people call and ask me, why are only 23% of women veterans completing a degree? And those people didn't really read the full report to understand the context that, in fact, a large number of women per capita are completing using a post-9/11 GI Bill. Yeah. And this person just suggested altering the text in the red and blue bars to better explain that the number of women veterans in higher ed is a higher ratio than that of overall military.
So that's an interesting point, and we'll be sure to take a look at how that's represented graphically. It's very clear in the text related to it, but we'll make sure that we can focus on that a little bit. So I'll give you the overall demographics of that as well, and another factor that I think is really useful and important to understand that. So there are only about 16% of the serving force who are women. and it's only about 10% of all veterans who are women. But about 23% of all student veterans who are receiving degrees are women. And then overall, of student veterans broadly, it's about 26% who are women. On top of that, when we look at Student Veterans of America chapters, 47% of our chapter leadership are women based on our last survey. So women are taking very active roles in higher education, in SVA chapters. They're graduating at higher rates and so on. And the other important data that's not in this presentation but that I think is useful to understand is that women who have served actually earn their degrees at higher rates than their civilian peers who have never served, including for Caucasian women, African American women, and Latinas. The Asian population is small enough that we can't say anything statistically significant about that population at all. But broadly for women, the women are earning their degrees at higher rates when they've served than those who haven't at the associate's degree, at the bachelor's degree, at the master's, and at the doctoral and professional degree levels. And those rates of variation range between 3 and 15% depending on which population and which degree you're talking about, 3 to 15% better than their civilian peers who have never served. The same thing, interestingly, is the case for African American males and Latinos. They're also earning their degrees at higher rates. And for Caucasian males, the only one where those who have not served is higher than those who have served is at the bachelor's level. For the associate's level or some college and for the advanced degree, the master's or doctoral level degrees, Caucasian males who have served are actually earning their degrees at higher rates as well. So there's some impact there that we think is related to information and knowledge about higher education, and some of it related to the benefit of GI Bill and the ability to pay for higher education that's impacting those diverse populations very positively as well. So the good news is my internet connection is back, and I can actually see slide 20 now. And what I want to tell you about slide 20 is that we have organized this one to cover those three primary areas: business management, marketing, and related support services, which is about 27%, and then a grouping of STEM degrees, which is 14.4%, but it breaks down into computer and information sciences at 6%, engineering at 2.3%, and so on. So we actually have high participation in STEM. The participation is actually higher than this, but in terms of the graduation rate, it's about 14.4%, which is reasonably high. And there are good proportions of women who are earning degrees in these disciplines as well, as well as other diversity characteristics. So there are some good numbers here that I think are useful. The thing to also understand here, though, that's a challenge and that we've been working on a little bit is that some STEM disciplines take 5 years in order to do your course sequencing and to be able to complete the degree. So we've been working on an extension and expansion of the GI Bill to add a 5th year for STEM disciplines and STEM majors so that they can pursue their degrees and earn their degrees. From there, then you see the next highest set of these areas: health professions and related programs, which are at 10%, liberal arts and sciences, general studies and humanities at nearly 10%, and then the stereotypical one that folks always think about related to veterans is only about 9.6%, so homeland security, law enforcement, firefighting, related protective services, and so on. Then you see a pretty good contribution in social sciences and education. There are a lot of folks who want to teach, whether they're at the K through 12 or undergraduate level, although far fewer who are looking to teach at the graduate level and earning PhDs. That's another area we're actually very interested in is how do we establish pathways to the professoriate so that folks can use their degrees in this area, get their advanced degrees, and then become faculty and work for university and colleges as well. So any questions on those areas where people are earning degrees?
So far, we don't have any questions in the chat box right now. We should be fine. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I want to tell you a little bit about Student Veterans of America as well. So this slide is actually a little dated. I have new numbers as of Friday. We actually have 1,423 chapters, and at those colleges and universities, there are 608,000 people using GI Bill benefits. So it's actually pretty good. Related to the number of chapters and representation, though that's still only a little over 600,000 of the 1.1 veterans currently in higher ed. About 140,000 of those, probably a little bit more than that, are very active. In other words, they participate in chapter meetings, they do service projects, they do fundraisers, they're engaged with activities on their campuses. They might be doing barbecues, they might be doing mentoring, they could be doing tutoring, it could be just about anything, but they're active on their campuses and doing things with our SVA chapter. And we do an awful lot in social media, including in LinkedIn and earned media, to tell the story of student veteran success, because one of the challenges that we have in higher education, and I'm going to be a little blunt in this audience in a way that I am not always, is that there are too many administrators and faculty who really think of student veterans as being, I'm going to use a derogatory term, dumb veterans, and that they're not qualified to be in their classrooms, and that we're doing this as a charitable reason as opposed to high academic performance. And so telling those stories of student veteran success and the GPA and the areas that they're studying and the graduation rates and the makeup of women veterans and ethnically diverse women and men veterans and their successes really makes a huge difference here. And the reason that we think that that's most important is that really empowers informed decision making before college. Right now, we know that there are a little over 20% who are going into the for-profit education institutions, about 60% into public schools, and about 20% into private not-for-profits. Most folks going into any of those sectors have no idea that there's any difference between those sectors, have no idea that there's a cost difference between those sectors, and have no information on how to appropriately choose a college, choose a major, think about what it is that they want to do with their life and how their college choices are going to impact those things, whether because of what they're choosing to study, where they're going, the geography of where they're at, or things like that. And it's important to understand that about 63% of all student veterans are first-generation college students. So they need some assistance making informed decisions. They don't have their parental network. They're beyond the reach of high school guidance counselors, and their peers are often giving them bad information because what their peers are doing is looking at what is the promotion potential while they're serving, or the ability to easily obtain a degree or to demonstrate that you're studying, because those things make a difference for promotion, and because the topics of those make almost no difference for promotion. So getting into a degree program that's distance ed that gives you complete flexibility is all you need for promotion while you're in the service, but it may not be what you need for successful civilian transition. So we want to make sure that they have the ability to make informed decisions ahead of time. The second thing we do is deliver high-impact programs to our student veterans while they're in school, and that includes chapter leader trainings, it includes our leadership summits, it includes a variety of how-tos, building their chapters, making their chapters sustainable, helping them help their college campuses, whether that's with the Career Services Office or the administration on early registration or the transferability of credits or any of those other kinds of things. And then also helping them think about pathways through internships and externships and other things that they may need, but that, again, as first-generation college students, they may not have adequate exposure to. Because so many student veterans are non-traditional, there are also some variations there. Over 50% of student veterans are married, over 40% of them have children, and of those who have children, about 20% of them are single parents. And so they do what most non-traditional students do. They come in, they go to class, they go home, they go to pick up their kids at school, they drop off kids at daycare, they run to their first or second job because they're often working to support themselves or their families and so on. And so we really focus on what do you need to get the full experience of higher education. So that's our middle of the life cycle. And then we partner with business and industry to help build robust talent pipelines to help them help student veterans and prospective students think about what do you want to do in the long term, and if this is what you want to do, how do you get there, as well as providing opportunities for internships and other kinds of experiential learning opportunities, and finally for the career opportunities in the long term. And we've been very successful in doing much of this with a variety of our partners and our tools. And so advancing to the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit about how we do some of this with our partners. So we have a whole portfolio of tools and services to help reach veterans, and those include a variety of personality assessments, some guidelines from folks like College Factual on how to choose a college or university. We do some education and training around the GI Bill comparison tool or the scorecards that the Department of Education puts out or other kinds of things. But if you can't do it for yourself, which many folks are not in a position to do, we also have put together a mentoring platform with our colleagues at Veterati. Veterati started out mentoring related to employment and career, but now we've got them doing some work with student veterans and getting alumni to mentor, getting current student veteran chapter leaders and student veterans to mentor, and folks broadly to engage with student veterans before they're going into higher education to help them make great decisions, while they're there to make decisions if they're thinking about major changes or doing something different or internships. And, oh, by the way, student veterans change majors on average 2.2 times compared to their civilian peers who have never served, who are 1.7 times. So that extra half major change could translate to another half a year or a year of school and extension in school beyond the period of eligibility of the GI Bill. So we want to make sure that we're giving the right information to student veterans at the key points, at every point where they might need information that will accelerate or enhance their decision making. Not because they're dumb, not because they're not good students, not because they can't make great choices, but because they can make better choices faster with the right information at the right times from colleagues who have come before them and from our peers and our chapters and from our research as well as from our business and industry partners and professionals in higher education and student affairs and other places as well. We also are working with business and industry pretty closely around their career opportunities, and we've done a partnership with the National Labor Exchange to advertise roles, including roles while students are in school. And as you may remember, I talked about the fact that half of student veterans work full-time while they're in school and a quarter work part-time while they're in school. Right now, most of them do not take long-term career goals into consideration while they're choosing what they're going to do while they're in school. And one of the things we've been working with our business and industry partners to do is to identify those roles that don't require a degree but will still enhance their opportunities for professional advancement and their ability to get familiar with a company or an industry sector or a particular area of work that they have interest in pursuing while they're in education, so that then they can have an easier transition into a full-time role or a role in that industry or sector because they've now got some job experience rather than just experience that's related to having to support a family and so on. We also think that by focusing recruitment with our business and industry partners on graduating student veterans, we do a couple of things. One, we actually eliminate the need to have access to bases, which is a huge challenge, one that we're solving separately, by the way, with the USO and their transition centers for us to be able to be there to help make informed decisions about college and university choices, but one that's still going to continue to be a barrier for business and industry. And then the second reason that I think this is important is on our next slide, and that is that focusing only on transitioning veterans with degrees ignores that larger talent pool of graduating student veterans and an even larger talent pool of current student veterans. So what we know about this pool of veterans, as you recall earlier, I said about 30% of transitioning service members have degrees, or 60,000 a year, but I have 100,000 student veterans graduating a year with current degrees, with the most recent education, with exposure to the most recent data tools and other sorts of tools that can be used in their careers. And most organizations don't understand this talent pool exists or how big it is because the misreporting in the media has really said student veterans are not successful in higher education. And I don't know if anybody on the call has been following it, but the Atlantic just released a narrative article on Friday that was picked up by the Hetchinger Report and a couple of others that essentially say that student veterans don't graduate from community colleges, and they're failing as a result. The reality is we actually know the pathing from community colleges generally tends to lead into those four-year programs, and we also know that there are 60-some thousand graduating from community colleges so far using the post-9/11 GI Bill. What they really demonstrated is the failure of the federal data collection on student veterans and their outcomes, and particularly as many of you are familiar with the student data collection really focusing only on first-time, first-year students who are entering in the fall semester and who never change schools. And that simply doesn't describe who student veterans are. When they talk about 6 student veterans being enrolled there, they just have a failure to understand who their population is or where they're going. But that headline picked up steam all over the country on the weekend and on Friday, and I spent most of my weekend and Monday answering questions about their methods and why it was a challenge, and we've had some folks talk to the author, and the author essentially said, look, the Atlantic edited the heck out of my headline, they edited the heck out of the article, we talked to you, you've got a quote in it, and I know they edited out most of the answers that your team graciously gave us. So there are some mythologies that still have to be reframed for most folks in this area. So that's where we're focused on all of those things. So there are a couple of contact information pieces here, and I would encourage you to stay in touch with us and really engage with us. We've got about 1,423 really engaged chapters. In those, we've got about 6,000, 7,000 really engaged student leaders and another 125,000 who work with us on a week-to-week and day-to-day basis, and representing, a good 600,000 plus student veterans. We do advocacy for all 1.1 million student veterans and 167,000 or so. So I think that there's some really good opportunities for colleges and universities to focus on these areas with us collaboratively. So with that, I will turn it back to the team there to do any question and answer and anything else that we'd like to do. And Chris and I are both sitting here together to answer questions.
Thank you both so very much. This is Kevin. I'm just going to go ahead and back up to slide 20. I believe someone wanted to see slide 20 once more. And please, if you have any questions, I know a lot of folks are asking about the presentation, and it will be posted. But while we look at this, if you have any other questions to anything that Chris or James might have said, feel free to post them into the comment or the question box.
So I just sent also the link to our overall student veterans, National Veteran Education Success Tracker on the studentveterans.org website. We actually created a full set of fact sheets that have even more of these graphics, and there are a couple of pages here that list every single degree area that's been earned, not just the top 15 or 18 or whatever's on this slide. So there's even more data at that site. There's a fact sheet that's about 10 pages long that has some really good graphics that are useful in this and so on. So all of those pieces are there. I do see a question from Joe Rasmussen who says, when can I access this data to see graduation and degrees on my campus? The answer is unfortunately that you can't. And the reason is because it's de-identified data from the National Student Clearinghouse combined with de-identified data from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And if we isolated it down to campuses, you'd actually be able to identify student veterans individually by that for many reasons. So we don't do that aspect. Chris,
but there's a workaround with that in that, and it's what I usually tell institutional researchers and vet center directors, in that odds are you have a contract already with the clearinghouse, and you have data on post 9/11 users on your campus. There's nothing stopping you from reaching out with those names and identifying information to clearinghouse and basically replicating the study at your institutional level. If you need help with that, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll walk you through, and I'll any details that aren't readily available that you need from the full report, I'll be able to help. And you also have a lot more data than we have on those students. So it's a much richer data pool that you'll be working with as well.
So I see that there's another question on whether or not SVA has information on bridge programs for licensure and certifications. So we have some data collected on how many people have used the GI Bill for licensure and certification programs in colleges and universities. It's between 5 and 6% of all student veterans, so it's not very high. But in terms of which specific licenses and certifications, it's not something that we've really delved into. It is a little bit in the clearinghouse data, but it's not much there. I think that it's a better opportunity probably there to look at what DoD has done on a state-by-state level and looking at what the reports I hope are still available, looking at what was done under joining forces on licensure and certification changes there. Department of Labor has been involved in that as well, but those are going to be your best sources for that data.
Before we take the other question, I just had a suggestion. If you can both speak specifically to campus level data capture issues, if you can, and kind of offer some of the guidance to institutions, because I know some institutions on the line would like to kind of know, the do's and don'ts, or at least the techniques they can use, or different things that they could do to help out student veterans.
I'll take that one. Probably the most common question I have in that regard is we can't directly ask, or we can't directly compel veterans or military service members to identify themselves. How do we locate them? How do we identify them in order to track them and better help them? There's been a lot of discussion around that, especially in the last 8 years since the Post-9 bill has begun. And one of the most common questions, and it usually pops up on either the application or another general form that is sent to all students, is something to the effect of, are you currently now or have you ever served in the armed services or the military or things of that nature? And then it's a simple yes-no question, and then the yes can go into more details of, are you a veteran, are you in the reservists, or are you in the active duty? The one of my soapbox issues, and I will try not to hop on it for this webinar, is reservists. Reservists are a very unique subgroup because they tend not to be classified under veterans, nor are they classified under active duty, and they often get forgotten, which is why I always tend to bring them up and discuss them, because they could be called up to active duty at any moment, and that creates a lot of stress on the reservists who have to deploy in 2 weeks when they're trying to withdraw from classes in a way that doesn't hurt them in the long run. So that is, so going back to the original question, probably the biggest question that I always get is, how do we identify student veterans and military service members? And the more federal census-based question of, are you a veteran, it really doesn't apply anymore, and I would really encourage, if you haven't already, to rethink that question on applications for schools. The other part is, I often hear that veterans are transitory, and that's very true. They do tend to transfer schools more often than traditional students before they graduate, and the schools that are in the middle, they don't have the entry point or the graduation point, often get left out. I think that's unfair. I think any school that helps a student veteran or any student proceed to that first degree should be counted and acknowledged. I think that's a larger higher ed debate and question, but as we're looking into NVEST, we're trying to keep track and at least acknowledge the school levels and the school sectors that are helping student veterans towards their initial degree. Any specific questions on that?
All right. While we wait for more questions to pour in, there's a comment made that the National Student Clearinghouse also has a new opportunity for campuses to add data elements to track veterans. So the comment is that the National Student Clearinghouse has details, if you contact them, on how you could possibly do that to track veterans.
Yeah, I think that it's really tough for us to add anything else to that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I just wanted to mention some upcoming webinars. May 9th at 1, we have METC Visit Recap, Implementing Healthcare Lessons Learned for Service Members and Veterans. And then on June 20th, we have Service Members Opportunity Colleges Degree Network System Rebooted. So please look for those webinar registrations. And again, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to join the conversation on Facebook or LinkedIn, or you can contact me, Sarah Pell, Project Coordinator. Again, the webinar will be posted on our webpage, so thank you all for joining us and have a good afternoon.